Good morning, everybody. Dear guests, dear friends, I would like to welcome everyone on behalf of the Rector of Wrocław University of Economics and Business, Professor Andrzej Kaleta. Rector Kaleta wishes the participants in our conference fruitful deliberations, interesting discussions, and invites everyone to the next conference in 2024. Today in Wrocław, we are celebrating the Science Day. And it is because of this celebration that Professor Kaleta is unable to attend our conference. On the 15th of November 1945, by the decision of Rector Stanisław Kulczyński, classes at both of the University of Wrocław and Wrocław University of Science and Technology began with a lecture by Professor Kazimierz Idaszewski. To commemorate this event, every year on the 15th of November, we celebrate the Science Day in Wrocław. Now I would like invite Her Excellency Ambassador Alana Hudson from Embassy of New Zealand. Her speech is titled New Zealand and the Indo-Pacific, Navigating a Shifting World. Please, floor is yours.
Dziękuję bardzo. I will speak in English, but first of all, enga mana, enga reo, enga rangatira ma, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. That was a long way of saying in the indigenous language of New Zealand, greetings, all you wonderful people. So it's a pleasure to be here in Wrocław in person. I joined 2 years ago, not long after I arrived, virtually, and last year was knocked out by COVID. So it's good to make up for it now and be here in person. And it's a great chance for us to be setting out how New Zealand is seeing the changing context in the Indo-Pacific. In my comments, I'm going to describe how we're seeing the emerging disruption and set out 3 big shifts that we are observing and talk a little bit about what we think they will mean for New Zealand's foreign policy. So, kind of goes without saying to note that the Indo-Pacific is New Zealand's wider home region. And so it's natural that our essential economic and security interests are grounded there. And it's home to half the world's population. What happens in the Indo-Pacific really does matter. Stability, security, and prosperity in this region, buttressed by effective regional architecture, are enduring national interests. The global outlook is experiencing heightened strategic tension and considerable levels of disruption and risk. New Zealand has traditionally seen itself as protected from a lot of global threats by its geography and relatively peaceful Pacific region. However, our interconnectedness with the world, the changing nature of the region, and the evolution of new threats mean that New Zealand is as affected as other countries by these global trends and an increasing complex international environment. Many of the assumptions that have underpinned our foreign policy for a generation or more are coming under real and sustained pressure. The appeal of liberal democracy has waned in many countries, and global cooperation and multilateral solutions on issues of importance to us can't be taken for granted. The Pacific region is no longer strategically benign, and Pacific Island countries face a number of shared challenges to regional stability and security. Through the Boe Declaration of 2018, New Zealand and Pacific partners recognised the threat of climate change as the single greatest threat to all aspects of the Pacific's way of life, and identified key challenges of external interference and coercion, domestic cyber vulnerabilities, and transnational crime. The effects on the international system of an increase in geostrategic competition and pressure on multilateral and regional rules and norms are evident. For example, and you know this very much here, Russia's invasion of Ukraine which was an assault by a permanent member of the UN Security Council on the rules-based international system, further exacerbated food and energy insecurity and revived old threats of overt state-to-state armed conflict and nuclear war. All these issues reduce the international system's capacity to tackle more existential challenges, notably climate change. You'll hear me talk about this a lot, which, along with other human-induced environmental challenges, will in many ways define the next decade, exacerbate food insecurity, and affect traditional sources of employment and cultural practices, such as those related to fisheries. Conflict over resources, particularly access to fresh water, is already occurring in many parts of the world, including the Indo-Pacific. Losses and damages from climate change are already evident in the Pacific and New Zealand. The cost of disaster response and recovery is a growing budget priority, and sea level rise a constant threat to core infrastructure and a demand on economic resources. Some in the Pacific are also facing the reality that sea level rise or severe weather events will make an island, or eventually a country, temporarily or permanently uninhabitable. Against this backdrop, New Zealand sees three shifts. These shifts are not binary. Instead, they represent shifts along spectrums between continuing influential drivers in the international system, rules and power, economics and security, and efficiency and resilience. The positions on these spectrums have been broadly stable for about the last 30 years, but now sustained and stable shifts are emerging. This provides a new and more challenging strategic context for our foreign policy. The shift from rules to power reflects a transition to a multipolar international order where international rules and their liberal underpinnings are more contested as more states have the power and inclination to challenge them. When global rules are challenged or ignored, there's a risk that they'll lose credibility, and the resulting environment, relative power, will matter more. Negotiating new international rules on emerging themes will also be more difficult. Certain countries are increasingly exercising hard power to test the limits of their rules-based international system at the expense of rules that serve smaller countries. The clearest example of this is Russia's unprovoked and illegal invasion of Ukraine, which is an assault on the international rules-based system by a permanent member of the Security Council. While there's been strong international condemnation of its actions, it has also reinvigorated hard power dynamics, such as nuclear deterrence and increased defence spending. With the Chinese government's more assertive foreign policy and DPRK's nuclear capability and aggressive rhetoric, and the increasing geopolitical engagement across the Pacific, the wider Indo-Pacific region is now the central theatre for increasing strategic competition. Together, these trends are generating a growing sense of disruption and uncertainty in international affairs, and it's becoming clear that they're limiting the scope for cooperation on a range of international issues that matter to us. For New Zealand, the prospect of a shift from rules to power is challenging. As a relatively small country, we have benefited significantly from the certainty and stability that the international rules-based system has given. And we've had remarkable sense in driving, shaping, and implementing rules and norms in areas that matter to us, for example, with international trade, oceans, and disarmament. As such, we've got a strong stake in fighting to defend and maintain an inclusive international rules-based system. The emergence of strategic competition is causing countries to reassess how they balance economic opportunities and security objectives. In the Indo-Pacific region, growing geostrategic competition, military competition, and securitization are accompanied by supply chain disruption, economic coercion, areas of economic decoupling, and imposition of economic sanctions. The combined effects will increasingly hamper trade opportunities, constrain economic growth, and increase the risk of conflict. Economic interdependencies are strong disincentives for conflict. However, as individual countries weigh and balance their interests, trade dependencies are being reassessed. Trade relationships are no longer being held up for the peace dividends they pay. Rather, economic interdependencies with strategic competitors are increasingly perceived as strategic vulnerabilities. The Indo-Pacific has been the engine for global economic growth, largely owing to China's expansion as a manufacturing powerhouse and market, changing demographics and the explosion of the middle class in Asia more broadly, the rise of global value chains, and the importance of maritime routes through Asia. Since the 2010s, the long-run geostrategic contest in the Indo-Pacific has sharpened, owing to an increasing tilt toward prioritizing security considerations. Countries in the region are finding it more and more challenging to both protect their economic relationships from wider foreign policy concerns and balance economic imperatives with critical political and security considerations. China's economic power and influence have grown over the past decade, and as a result, the Chinese government has become more assertive in its foreign policy, which is the primary driver of strategic competition. This has increased regional tensions, including in the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait, and prompted significant shifts in foreign and defence policy in the region. As geostrategic competition continues to increase in the region, the effectiveness of various regional architectures may be challenged and new groupings might form. For New Zealand, ASEAN's centrality and its ability to facilitate an open, inclusive, stable and prosperous Indo-Pacific region is essential and should not be taken for granted. Within the Pacific, the risk of the shift in the strategic balance is now a present and serious concern. New Zealand has a strong interest in supporting Pacific priorities and interests, including maintaining the primacy and effectiveness of the Pacific Islands Forum in the region and pursuing shared Pacific priorities, including the principles of democracy, good governance, and non-interference in international affairs. So what does this all mean for New Zealand's interests? We face a less stable, wider Indo-Pacific region where interstate conflict could occur and security considerations already dominate key partners' thinking. In the future, New Zealand may face situations where our terms of trade are impacted as importers and exporters need to absorb market disturbances or seek less lucrative but more stable markets. As geopolitical and security considerations loom larger, New Zealand will be less able to prioritise economic priorities, and will likely need to devote more energy and resources to defence and security imperatives, including to shore up our economic resilience. The final shift sees just-in-time efficiency. I studied at an economic school, so in the 1990s, that was very much what we were all about, just-in-time, through a move to just-in-case caution. As some countries and corporations are increasingly concerned about the resilience of market and supply chains after the impacts of COVID and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as well as the risks of relying on strategic competitors for access to strategic resources. Exactly where this shift will settle is not yet clear, and it will probably be different for different countries. Environmental, social, and sustainability challenges will be an increasing focus of new trade rules and business decisions. For New Zealand, maintaining support for free trade in the World Trade Organization is likely to be hard work, but it remains critical. One of our key challenges is to increase the diversification of our trade relationships, and in this regard, we welcome the recent EU-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement to support our valuable trade with the EU and here in Poland. Within the Indo-Pacific, we have a range of FTAs, including, and I apologise for the acronyms, CPTPP, ANZFTA, RCEP, as well as a range of valuable bilateral agreements with China and the Republic of Korea, for example. So I was asked to talk today about the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. This is an initiative prompted by the United States, which we welcome as to add to the opportunity for regional engagement in the Indo-Pacific. Although for us, the absence of market access from its scope means it won't fully bridge the gap created by the US's absence from existing regional plurilateral trade agreements. So what is IPEF? It's an economic agreement covering trade, supply chains, the clean economy and fair economy. It involves 14 economies from within the region, including US obviously, New Zealand, Australia, many ASEANs, Fiji and India, as well as Japan and Korea. And the economies involved represent 40% of global GDP in the year 2021 at least. So strategically, it's important for New Zealand to be an active partner of this grouping to help shape an Indo-Pacific order that delivers regional stability and economic integration in a sustainable and inclusive way. And it's an opportunity for us, of course, to strengthen our economic cooperation with the US, where we don't have an active FTA. The framework will cover some of the most important future-focused economic issues for our region and the world, including harnessing the digital economy, decarbonising our economies, and making supply chains more resilient. And hot off the press news, overnight in San Francisco there was an IPEF ministerial meeting where they signed the supply chain agreement. For us, the principles of sustainability and inclusively are really importantly embedded right throughout the framework. So it's definitely an area to watch. So in conclusion, you will have heard me stress a lot that heightened strategic tension and considerable levels of disruption and risk are real. So the three shifts I've described, from rules to power, from economics to security, and efficiency to resilience, are framing how New Zealand looks at responding to these challenges. Supporting stability, security, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region is a key New Zealand interest. The regional architecture of the Indo-Pacific has and will continue to evolve. New Zealand will continue to balance pursuing its interests and principles through the existing inclusive and innovative regional architecture that has a history of developing for the region and any novel minilateral groupings as these develop. At a time when the focus in the region is shifting from trade and economics towards defence and security issues, New Zealand will continue to ensure it's engaged in and seen as a useful contributor to the key discussions and issues facing the region. Diplomacy will remain critical to navigating the shifting world. Dziękuję.
Ms. Ambassador, thank you very much for a very fruitful presentation. Such problems like resilience, climate change, international cooperation between our countries, not only in Asia, but also in Poland, in Europe, they are very important for us, for our society. And also, I would like to share with you our new information. Then Routledge accepted our book. This book is written by a team from Wrocław University of Economics and Business and our colleagues from Warsaw School of Economics. This book will be published in April or May 2024, and it is connected with resilience in East Asia. And here we have our colleague, Professor Sebastian Bobowski. Professor, please introduce yourself. And he's coordinator this book and director of this project. Thank you very much for your presentation. Now I would like to invite Her Ambassador Anita Lydia Lulima, Embassy of Indonesia, and subject of presentation is the implementation of ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, a platform for an inclusive Indo-Pacific region. Good morning, and please, floor is yours.
Please turn on your microphone. Your microphone is muted.
Okay, this is Madeleine Kalana, my dear colleague, Mr. Richard Dibbles, and here's ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be able to be back at this forum to share our perspective on the Indo-Pacific strategies and factors of international cooperation and exchange through the lens of Indonesia as a country which strategically situated at the nexus of the Indian and Pacific Oceans itself. Today's theme is very much in line with the spirit of the Indonesian Chairmanship of ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, this year, emphasizing that the Indo-Pacific region must be approached not only in the form of security, but also from economic development, a paradigm of collaboration in an inclusive manner, in the Indo-Pacific region. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, the Asia-Pacific and Indian Ocean regions are amongst the most dynamic in the world, as well as centers of economic growth for decades. The various interests of major powers frequently collide in the Indo-Pacific region. Our region is not immune to various global challenges and deepening geopolitical rivalries, particularly the potential conflict in the Indo-Pacific. Failure to manage these challenges may threaten peace and stability in the region. Each of the countries have different ways of looking at the Indo-Pacific, but this is also evidence of a converging interest among countries in promoting stability and addressing the challenges faced by the region. For Indonesia, peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific and Indian Ocean region is very important. It will affect peace and stability in the world. The word peace and stability is key in Indonesia's foreign policy. As a maritime archipelagic state, the focus of Indonesia's foreign policy and diplomacy is to secure our maritime interests by integrating two strategic seas, the Indian and the Pacific Ocean. And as a member of major regional organization in Southeast Asia, ASEAN, the key word is equally important for Indonesia's engagement with ASEAN, one of the cornerstones of Indonesia's foreign policy to bring about peace, stability, security, and prosperity in the region. For Indonesia, the Indo-Pacific could not be a pawn of rivalries. Instead, it is a sea of opportunities and is too large for any single country to dominate. Common security, common stability, and common prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region must be a public good. This can only be achieved through strategic collaboration. As the chair of ASEAN, Indonesia will continue to navigate ASEAN, the region, to play a central role to synergize the various initiatives and interests among countries. In a span of half of the century, ASEAN has become the engine of peace and prosperity in the region. So far, ASEAN managed to create and harness the habit and culture of dialogue. The culture is a rare item that is priceless today through the platform of ASEAN-led mechanism, such as ASEAN Regional Forum, ASEAN Plus with dialogue partners, East Asian Summit, that is in nature consists of countries in the Indo-Pacific region. One shall not forget that ASEAN is the only regional organization which in one platform can bring together all the major powers and regional powers at the same time. Therefore, we determined to prevent the region from becoming a site for strategic rivalry among major powers and will manage a balanced relationship with all major powers as well as work with friends to ensure ASEAN centrality by enhancing ASEAN credibility, strengthening capacity, and preserving its unity. ASEAN views the Asia-Pacific and Indian Ocean regions not as contiguous territorial spaces, but as a closely integrated, interconnected region. ASEAN outlook of Indo-Pacific is therefore the manifestation of those objectives I mentioned above. It is the initiative by Indonesia and adopted at the leaders' meeting in Bangkok 2019 to reinforce the ASEAN-centered regional architecture. The AOIP puts emphasis on several principles, including cooperation, inclusiveness, transparency, and openness, as well as respect for international law. It aims to guide cooperation and promote an enabling environment for peace, stability, and prosperity while upholding the rules-based regional architecture. 4 priority areas for cooperation, namely maritime cooperation, connectivity, sustainable development, and economic cooperation has been pursued. Central to the AOIP also is the broader application of the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, TAC, the regional code of conduct that has served ASEAN in sustaining peace and stability in the region for over 50 years. Respecting international law is not an option, but an obligatory for us to make peace and stability in order we make use all the potentials of growing significance in the Indo-Pacific two-world economy. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, under the chairmanship of Indonesia this year, with the theme of ASEAN Matters, Epicentrum of Growth, Indonesia is able to implement the ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific as mandated by the Leaders' Declaration on mainstreaming 4 priority areas of the AOIP that will encourage the strengthening of ASEAN ownership and centrality, as well as the constructive involvement of dialogue partners in AOIP, mainstreaming efforts that has been mainstreaming effort. Apology. While some doubt the concrete realization of AOIP because lack of actionable visions, during the 43rd ASEAN Summit and the East Asia Summit last September, Indonesia has stepped up by holding the ASEAN Indo-Pacific Forum. And also having a closer partnership with the Pacific Island Forum and Indian Ocean Rim Association. As the flagship of events, the AOIP implementation, the ASEAN Indo-Pacific Forum was held during 43rd ASEAN Summit and the East Asia Summit in December 2023. The forum has been able to develop concrete cooperation of green infrastructure and resilient supply chains, digital transformation and creative economy, as well as sustainable and innovative financing. And at the end, the meeting of the ASEAN Indo-Pacific Forum has identified list of concrete projects to implement the AOIP, namely 93 projects of cooperation amounted of $38.2 billion and 73 potential projects amounted $78.8 17.8 billion US dollar. It shows that the forum has been a platform for an inclusive Indo-Pacific region in building a stronger and more inclusive cooperation and collaboration between ASEAN member states and partners in the Indo-Pacific region. The forum has served as a platform for public, state-owned enterprises and private sectors as ASEAN member states and ASEAN's external partners to engage in constructive discussions, cooperate on concrete projects, and enhance collaboration in the Indo-Pacific region. In order to transform rivalry in the Indo-Pacific region into mutually beneficial cooperation, consequently, this region can establish cooperation based on mutual benefit, and at the end contribute to the peace, stability, and prosperity in the region. Another outcome of the implementation of AOIP was the initiative to have a closer partnership with the Pacific Islands Forum and the Indian Ocean Rim Association in order to create a stable and peaceful Indo-Pacific through inclusive cooperation. Countries in the Indian and Pacific Oceans are an integral part of Indo-Pacific region, whereby whatever happens in the region will likely affect all of us. Furthermore, ASEAN and the countries in the Indian Ocean and Pacific also face similar challenges and opportunities. Therefore, they must unite to overcome challenges and advance, as well as to maintain the region's peace, stability, and prosperity. ASEAN has intensified concrete cooperation in various areas of common interest, such as the economy, maritime affairs, and climate change, through a memorandum of understanding which was signed in September 2023. Strengthen ASEAN relations with the Pacific through establish a secretariat cooperation between ASEAN and PIF, and we also develop an ASEAN maritime outlook. Ladies and gentlemen, before I end my presentation, allow me to point out our partnership, the partnership of EU and ASEAN, that in December 2022, it's commemorating 45 years anniversary of dialogue relations, and committed to develop the ASEAN-EU strategic partnership that is based on international law, mutual interest, and mutually beneficial cooperation on issues of common concern and the principle of equality. During the last summit, our President Joko Widodo, stressed two important issues. First, that ASEAN-EU partnership must contribute to an inclusive economic recovery, and second, Indonesia encouraged ASEAN-EU partnership to build a greener and sustainable future. President Joko Widodo also encouraged ASEAN-EU partnership to cooperate for the future of ASEAN and European Union and the work that is based on the principle of mutual equality, respect, and benefit. In the context of Indo-Pacific, Indonesia welcomes EU's strategies in the Indo-Pacific, in which its implementation needs to be synergized with the ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific. To conclude, to make the Indo-Pacific an arc of peace, the implementation of AOP need to be concrete, inclusive, open, and mutual beneficial. Thus, ASEAN welcomes external parties to collaborate on common concerns that is in line with AOIP. The ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific could be the basis of our partnership, that underlying principle for promoting cooperation in the areas of common interest through innovative, interdisciplinary, and complementary approach. Let us be partners. I thank you.
Thank you very much for a very interesting speech. Cooperation between EU and ASEAN are very important for both regions and for peace all over the world. I hope that we will meet not only in virtual way, but you will come to us to explain our students and our academics also what could be this cooperation and what are perspectives of such cooperation. Thank you very much. I would like to invite Richard Tibbles, Special Envoy for the Indo-Pacific at European External Action Service, and his speech is the EU Indo-Pacific Strategy. Floor is yours. Welcome.
Dear moderator, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me just check first that you can hear me. Everything okay? I would assume it is. Thanks very much for inviting me to this conference today. I'm honored to be here, alas, only virtually. I would have loved to have been with you in person. And let me stress how important it is that the Indo-Pacific is seen as an important topic of conversation right across the EU, whether it is a member state in the east, south, north, or west. And this is the message I want to pass to our Indo-Pacific friends in the audience. The Indo-Pacific is a region of interest to all 27 member states, and it's great that Wrocław University is organizing this conference today. Let me divide my remarks into 4 parts. Why is the Indo-Pacific region important? What are the EU's interests? What is our strategy? And what have we done since we've adopted it? So why is it important? And this has been already pointed out, I think, by the 2 ambassadors that have spoken before me. The region is home to 3/5 of the world's population, and this year alone, it will constitute and contribute 67% of global GDP. The region hosts major waterways of vital economic importance, whether it's the Malacca Straits, the South China Sea, or the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. And half the global container fleet and nearly 90% of the world's largest ships pass through the Taiwan Strait each year. And the region is obviously rich in natural resources. The South China Sea alone accounts for 12% of global fish catch. And the region has seen a significant growth in carbon dioxide emissions, and the region will account for 70% of global energy demand by 2020. So therefore, climate change is expected to put further pressure on vulnerable populations, on biodiversity and the natural resources of the region. All of this, combined with the geopolitical competition and increasing tensions in the South and East China Sea, in the Taiwan Straits, makes it plain for all to see that the Indo-Pacific region is of vital geoeconomic and geopolitical importance today and in the future. So the EU's interests in the region naturally flow from the region's importance. Together, Europe and the Indo-Pacific are economically central to global growth. We represent 70% of global trade in goods and services and 60% of foreign direct investment. And the Indo-Pacific is the second largest destination for EU exports. And it's very much a two-way street. The Indo-Pacific is a beacon of innovation with its highly educated and dynamic population. Many of the solutions to the challenges Europeans are facing have already been tested in the region. So this is, as I said, a really very much a two-way street where we have much to benefit from each other. And overall, the EU wishes to see an open, inclusive, free, and stable Indo-Pacific. So that's the basis on which we will work with our partners to uphold international law and the rules-based international order, to ensure freedom of navigation and sea lines of communication, to enhance trade and economic relations, to contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals in the Indo-Pacific, notably to work with Indo-Pacific partners to meet the objectives of the major environmental and climate agreements, the Paris Agreement, Convention on Biodiversity, and the newly negotiated Treaty on the High Seas. And let me say that on top of that, the combination of recent developments, should we say, the 3 Cs as I call them, COVID, climate change, and conflict, namely Russia's invasion of Ukraine, have made it all the more obvious that a close partnership between the EU and the Indo-Pacific is vital. There is a 4th C, in addition to COVID, climate, and conflict, that we cannot ignore, and that's China, of course. The EU has a distinct strategy towards China based on our clear-eyed assessment of it, namely that it is at one and the same time a partner, a competitor, as well as a systemic rival. China will remain a vital economic partner for the EU, as it will for the rest of the world, and it is clear that many of the world's biggest challenges can only be successfully tackled with China being part of the solution. On the other hand, it is vital to establish a level playing field for economic relations without economic coercion, and that aggressive military rhetoric and exercises must be avoided. A succession of EU commissioners and the High Representative himself have been in Beijing over recent months to explain the EU approach and to prepare for the upcoming EU-China summit. And that'll be a great opportunity at the highest level to explain the EU's position to China's leadership. And within all of this, the EU's de-risking approach clearly involves strengthening our partnerships with other Indo-Pacific partners, because effectively de-risking will only work if we are able to enhance other partners' value chains, regulatory systems, and general governance. So let me turn to the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy. First and foremost, it's a commitment to enhance our engagement with the region, to build lasting partnerships, and to support closer links and connectivity between the EU and the Indo-Pacific. Ours is a values-driven one, seeking cooperation beyond geopolitical divides and great power rivalries. And we believe we're a reliable partner in supporting regional stability in the Indo-Pacific. Our approach is one of cooperation, not confrontation. We want to contribute to stability, security, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific. We want to contribute to building more resilient and sustainable global value chains by diversifying our trade and economic relations. We want to contribute to green and sustainable solutions. And we want to contribute to developing technological standards and regulations in line with international best practice. So it's with those thoughts in mind that our strategy has identified 7 areas of practical work. First, sustainable and inclusive prosperity, to build back better, to develop resilient and diversified value chains. Secondly, green transition, to fight, mitigate, and adapt to climate change by building green alliances and partnerships as a way to step up information and solution sharing. Thirdly, ocean governance, to ensure the sustainable management of the ocean's resources and to safeguard biodiversity while upholding international law. Fourthly, digital governance and partnerships, including, very importantly, research and innovation. We want to enhance cooperation and interoperability of standards, to also to ensure the free flow of data based on the highest possible standards. Fifthly, connectivity. This is a crucial area as regards all aspects of connectivity, and the EU's Global Gateway is the key vehicle for delivering concrete outcomes in this field, engaging the private sector as much as possible. Sixthly, security and defense. The objective here is to build partnerships with our Indo-Pacific partners, which complement their existing security and defense cooperation arrangements with countries such as the US, Japan, or Australia. And lastly, human security. We've developed fantastic cooperation during the COVID pandemic which enable us to put ourselves in a better position to tackle future health crises and develop healthy and sustainable food systems. And in addition to that, obviously, we have a long-standing cooperation with many partners in the field of disaster risk reduction and preparedness and humanitarian assistance. All of these areas of work are going to be underpinned by enhanced political engagement. The Indo-Pacific is now a standard item on our bilateral political dialogues. We are enhancing our presence in regional fora. Some of those have been mentioned by the ambassador the ambassador of Indonesia. And we are organizing multilateral ministerial forums, bringing everyone together from the EU and the Indo-Pacific. 2 such forums have been held in Paris in February 2022 and Stockholm 2023, bringing together over 60 EU and Indo-Pacific countries. And we believe these are occasions where we can highlight the similarities between the EU's approach and our partners' approach to the Indo-Pacific. And we will host a 3rd such ministerial forum in Brussels early next year. Now, let me finally turn to what we have done in the framework of our strategy since it was adopted. Firstly, we've stepped up our range of comprehensive political agreements, our partnership and cooperation agreements, signed those with Thailand and Malaysia last December. On this very day, and this is something which I'm very pleased to announce today. So earlier today in the Pacific, in Samoa, the EU and the African, Caribbean and Pacific countries signed the new cooperation agreement, now called the Samoa Agreement, and the Pacific Protocol to the Samoa Agreement will intensify our dialogue with our Pacific partners. In the area of trade, we've concluded comprehensive trade agreements with Japan, Korea, Singapore and Vietnam already, and they are now driving forward bilateral trade flows very successfully. The ambassador of New Zealand has already referred to the free trade agreement, which has now been signed, and we're looking forward to the ratification of that very, very shortly. We're pursuing negotiations with Australia, India, and Indonesia. We've relaunched negotiations with Thailand recently, and we are looking now at the conditions for relaunching negotiations with the Philippines, and a similar exercise is also underway with Malaysia. And the Samoa Agreement, which I've referred to, should allow us to extend the EU-Pacific Economic Partnership Agreement to further Pacific islands. In the field of green transition, I don't think there is a partner in the Indo-Pacific with whom we're not working, from Djibouti and East Africa in the west through South and Southeast Asia to the Pacific Islands. Just 2 examples here. The Green-Blue Alliance for the Pacific is our major project with our Pacific partners, tackling climate mitigation, adaptation and resilience. And secondly, the ASEAN Green Europe initiative is tackling climate change, pollution and biodiversity loss with our ASEAN partners. With our G7 partners, we are developing and implementing just energy transition partnerships with India, Vietnam, Indonesia and South Africa. And the European Investment Bank has just signed a 500 million program with Vietnam to support implementation. Digitalization is obviously one of the crucial areas going forward, and we are expanding our network of digital partnerships. They are now agreed with Japan, Korea, and Singapore, and we are also developing digital trade arrangements with those same 3 countries. Our digital work covers 5G, beyond 5G, 6G, artificial intelligence, the resilience of supply chains in the semiconductor field, green data infrastructure, and the development of digital skills for workers. And a similar range of topics are also being discussed in the context of the EU-India Trade and Technology Council. And we have agreed a joint declaration with 12 Indo-Pacific countries on the protection of personal data as well. I mentioned Global Gateway and connectivity, and the objective really is to boost green, modern, resilient investments for sustainable connectivity, from infrastructure to regulatory frameworks in the field of transport, energy, health, and education, and digital. I won't go through the many practical projects we have been doing with our partners in this field. Maybe I just mention the comprehensive air transport agreement, which was agreed between EU and ASEAN countries last December at the summit that the Indonesian ambassador referred to. This will lead to more flight options and more competitive prices between the 37 countries of the EU and ASEAN, leading to more people-to-people contacts and business opportunities. Really, really important. And with Japan and India, we're developing connectivity partnerships, which will allow us to work with those countries in other countries on connectivity. I won't go into the other areas of the strategy too much, given the limited time available. Just let me stress the importance of the respect for international law, and that obviously applies in particular to respect of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which is so important for ensuring freedom of navigation and the security of supply chains in that part of the world. And we're obviously following closely ASEAN's work with China on a code of conduct for the South China Sea, and looking with great concern at some of the incidents which have taken place in recent months in that respect. Let me conclude by saying the following. The EU's approach is holistic. So it's not just economic, it's not just security, it's covering the whole policy spectrum. And the reason for this is very simple, I think. The cooperation across all of our 7 areas is designed to enhance the resilience of our Indo-Pacific partners and ourselves. Resilience in all forms: economic, political, societal, environmental. We have a clear interest as the EU in the Indo-Pacific region being a region comprising sovereign, independent countries, being robust to be able to protect their national interests. This is a region increasingly affected by geopolitical rivalries, and geopolitics and geoeconomics cannot be dealt with separately. So whether it's diversifying supply chains, supporting partners in the green and digital transitions, building sustainable infrastructure, supporting partners' capacity to tackle health pandemics, or working with partners in the field of security and defense, all of these areas are designed to reinforce our partners' capabilities, and this is clearly in the interest of a strong Europe. And with that, thank you very much, and all the very best for the rest of your conference.
Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. It is very important not only for Europe and ASEAN, but our cooperation between the regions, between region Asia-Pacific region and European Union. It is very crucial for all over the world, because it is our future. Our future have to be clean, have to be fruitful, have to be peaceful, because in other way, all our nations will have strong problems. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, our speakers. We will find this session. I would like to invite you for coffee break, and we will meet at 10:25. Thank you very much.